This video goes along with my article about all things Glock. We are going to take this pistol apart completely. We're going to perform all the safeties checks, all the functions checks. We're going to talk about how to clean it and lubricate it so your Glock lasts a lifetime. Now let's get started taking down this Gen 3 Glock 27 I have here. But before we do, I want to point out one thing. This firearm has 2 pins here and 1 pin here. This is Glock's 3-pin setup. They also have a 2-pin setup like on this Glock 43. It has 1 pin here and only 1 pin there. Before we take this down, what we got to do is clear it out. Lock the slide to the rear. Visually, physically check the chamber. Check the mag well. We have a clear firearm. Pull the slide to the rear. Let it go all the way forward. Point the gun in a safe direction. Squeeze the trigger. You're going to hear the firing pin release. You're also going to see your trigger should stay to the rear. That's totally normal, okay? Now we're going to remove this slide from the frame. Make your hand into a C, wrap it right around the back of that slide, and you can see when I close my grip, I can move the slide ever so slightly to the rear. All you got to do is move this about 1/4 of an inch to the rear. I'm going to pull down on this tab and the tab that's exactly on the other side. This is your slide lock. I'm going to pull down on these and release the slide forward, and it's going to move forward just like that and come off your frame. Your frame has these 4 rails. This is what your slide slides on. We're going to put this frame to the side and take out your recoil spring and guide rod and your barrel. Now, this gun is field stripped. You don't have to break it down any further than this to do majority of anything you're ever going to do to this gun. But we're going to go a little bit deeper, and actually we're going to go a lot deeper and tear this whole thing apart. So let's take this slide apart. Before we do, I want to name a couple components just so you have an idea of what they are. Right here is your firing pin safety, this plunger right here. On the opposite side is your extractor. Right here is a firing pin tang, and this back part is the back plate. Now, we're going to start by removing this back plate, but in order to do so, we have to first make sure that this tang is all the way back in its backmost position. So you can hear it clicked all the way back, and now what that does is it allows me to see this black plastic piece right here, which is called the spacer sleeve. And we need to depress this spacer sleeve towards the front of the slide, remove spring tension so we can slide this back plate off, okay? But remember, this is going to have spring tension, so don't just pull this slide plate off. Keep your thumb over top of it. So I'm going to press down on this spacer sleeve, remove the tension, and now you can see that this comes right off, okay? Back plate comes right off, and now I can pull out my striker assembly, and we're going to take this down even further, but for now, set it off to the side. Alright, so right here, this is your extractor, depressor, plunger, and spring. We're going to take out this extractor by pressing down on your safety, firing pin safety plunger, and the extractor will come right out. There we go. Here's your extractor, and now I can pull out my firing pin safety and spring. So we're going to take down this striker assembly completely, insert it in your slide backwards with the tang resting on the side of the slide, just like that. Then we're going to remove the spring tension, we're going to push the spring down and remove the tension on this black collar right here. It's actually 2 pieces that look like a cup, and you'll see once I take them apart. But be very careful because these things are small and they can go launching anywhere and you don't want to lose them. So be careful, just remove the spring tension, and you can see they both come off just like that. And now my spring comes off. Here's my firing pin and my spacer sleeve. Your slide's completely broken down along with your striker assembly. We're going to set that off to the side and get started on the frame. The easiest thing to do is start with your punch, and we're going to start with this trigger housing pin, the rear one. Remember, when you're removing the pins, we're going to go from the left side of the gun to the right side as you are holding it. So like a book, left to right. We're going to push this pin through, and it's really simple. You don't have to pound on any of these pins. They slide with really minimal force. If you have two pins here, we'll start with the top one, all right? And we're going to push this pin out, just like that, comes straight out. You may have to wiggle your slide stop to get it to move. Do not hammer on this pin. I see a lot of people hammering on this pin. Do not do it. There's a spring in here that goes to your slide stop, and if you hammer it, you can break that spring, and you don't want to do that. So I'm going to show you right here how easy it is. I'm putting pressure in on this pin, and it's not moving. As soon as I move this up, you see the pin slid right out. Very easy. That's all you got to do. And now my slide stop comes out, and you can see there's a tiny spring right there. Okay, it's a delicate spring. You don't want to break that. This portion right here is your locking block. All you got to do is kind of pry up on it just a little bit, get it started, and your locking block comes out just like that. I can pull out now my whole trigger assembly group. I'm going to show you how to break this down, but first, for reference, here is your trigger shoe, this portion right here, and this portion, this tab right here, is part of your trigger safety, okay? Your trigger bar right here. If you're reading along in the article, this is the cruciform that I mentioned in the article. This is your cruciform as part of your trigger bar. Here is your connector, trigger connector, is this metal piece right here. This is your ejector. It's a metal piece. If it looks bent to you and on your firearm, that's totally normal. This is a 40, it's straight. The 9mm one is bent a little bit, and some of the other calibers are bent in slight angles, so don't try to go bending that back. It's bent for a reason. Okay, now to remove your trigger bar from the housing is very simple. All you're going to do is straighten it out and give it a little twist. It comes straight out. All right, that'll let you see the trigger spring right there. There's your trigger spring. Remove my trigger bar from the spring. So you can remove this trigger shoe from the bar. However, on your factory triggers, you'll see a pin on this side, but not on that side. And that's because you actually have to punch this pin through the polymer. And once you do that, you're not really supposed to reuse this trigger shoe. So we're going to leave this on, and there's really no reason to take this trigger shoe off from the trigger bar. We are going to take off our trigger spring, just like that. So your connector right here comes straight out. Don't pry on this. You don't want to bend this or cause any other angles. What we're going to do is we're going to push from the opposite side through that hole. So I have a small tool here that I can press in, and there we go. And you can see it kind of pushed it out, and now I can pull it the rest of the way, and this comes out. Remove our magazine release, and if you look in there, you can see that there is a spring right there. All right, that straight piece right there, that is the spring, and you can see when I depress it, that's what's giving the tension on your magazine release button. In order to take this apart, we have to move it to that notch. Okay, so if you see that notch right there, we're going to line that up. Now, I find it's easier to go from the top, so all you got to do is press in on this spring, and it comes straight out. And now you can see I can remove my magazine release. Now, in order to take that spring out, you're going to need needle nose pliers. We're going to grab it as tight as we can, pull straight out just like that. Okay. Last thing we have to do is take out our slide lock. This is quite easy. You see right in here is a spring that puts pressure on your slide lock. We're going to press down on that spring, remove the tension, and the slide lock is going to come straight out. There we go. Here's your slide lock. And to remove this spring, just pull straight up on that guy. And there you go. We have just completely broken this down to its basic pieces. And this is a great time to start cleaning it. We are going to need a cleaner and a lubricant. I really like Rand CLP. This is their bore and bolt cleaner, and this is their CLP. I really like their hog grease. This is their heavy application weapons grease. It just works really, really well. I love this stuff. I also really like this pig lube. It works really well, and this one smells like bacon, which is always a plus. It's not bacon grease, it just smells like bacon, but it's really cool. But whatever you use, just make sure you follow along with the manufacturer recommendations on how to use a product, because some of the solvents or two-in-one products work a little bit differently, and you want to be utilizing it the way the manufacturer recommends. Some of the equipment you're going to need to clean your firearm. This punch rod is going to come with your Glock. It has an eyelet in there, and we'll use that later on. And your bore brush. You can get one of these cleaning brushes. Get one with very stiff bristles. It helps in cleaning. You can also use one of these bore snakes. These are really cool. They come in handy. It's basically a nylon and cotton rope infused with a couple of copper brushes. Now, I like to use Q-tips. Just be careful when you're using Q-tips that the cotton doesn't pull off and get stuck in any of these components and left behind, okay? And then you can use these cotton patches. These are just basically cotton squares. So now that everything's clean and dry, we are going to put it all back together. We're going to start with our slide. First thing we're going to do is put our striker assembly back together. So spacer sleeve and our firing pin, and we're just going to go backwards. Now when you put these cups back in, ensure that they don't line up with the edge of this spring, and it'll make sense once you try to do it on your own. Once again, be really cautious with these because they're small and you can easily launch these across the room. There you go, and now you can see that this is back together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our extractor and our firing pin safety back together. Put your spring back in the safety. It should kind of lock in place, and slide that guy in there. Press in on this plunger, hold it down, and drop your extractor in there. You'll see the circle portion is going to go towards the shooter. So push this down, drop the circle portion towards the rear. Now don't worry that you don't have tension on your extractor. You're going to get that by putting in your extractor depressor plunger. This goes spring side to the shooter, or towards the shooter. So drop that guy in there. And now put your striker assembly in, back plate back on, and what we need to do is press down on this spacer sleeve. You can use your punch once again. Slide it in as far as it will go, but you'll notice that you can't put it in all the way because your extractor depressor plunger needs to be also pressed in. So we're going to press that guy in now and push it the rest of the way up, and you hear it click into place, and there you go. Now that this is put back together, it's a perfect time to check our firing pin safety, and I'll show you how to do that. We're going to push our firing pin tang to the forwardmost position. When we do that, you should not see your firing pin, the firing pin protruding outside of that breech face. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to depress this firing pin safety and push forward on the tang. So let's do that. Push forward. Now when I put this there, you can see my firing pin is protruding outside or through the hole in the breech face. Okay. So we just performed our firing pin safety check. If yours performed like that, you're good to go. So let's make sure our extractor is also working. So we're going to press out right here, and it should just move back. And there you go. So now I know my extractor is working, my firing pin safety is working. So let's get our frame back together, and we'll start that by putting our trigger group back together. So here's our housing. We're going to take our connector, and this is going to go right back in the way we came out. So push that guy right back in there and make sure it goes all the way in this. So when you reinstall this trigger spring, you want it in an S configuration. Now what I mean by that is there's a hook on this side, and then there's a hook on the opposite side. You want those hooks to look like an S. This bottom hook is going to go right through this hole on the back side of your trigger housing, and the other side is going to go through the hole on your trigger bar. There you go. Now to get this back in the trigger housing is very simple. You're going to rotate it off to the side, push down, and put it right in there. Now we're going to put in our slide lock. To start, we're going to grab our spring, grab it towards the end, and then insert this hook portion towards the front into that groove. And it's got to go into that groove all the way. Make sure it's seated, and you can see right here that front portion is flush. It's got to be seated. If it's not seated, it's not going to sit right and it'll pop out. Now your lock needs to be inserted a certain way. First of all, you'll see it has a a bar sticking up, that has to be pointed up. Also, if you look at it, it has an L shape to it. That L shape needs to be facing towards the shooter. So insert it a portion of the way, press down on your spring, release it, and you can see that now it has its spring tension back. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is put our magazine release back in. You can do it one of two different ways. I've had a little bit more success putting in the button first, so that's how I'm going to show you how to do it here. So we're going to drop our button in first, just like that, and I'm going to hold it kind of steady on either side so it doesn't fall out. And I'm going to take my spring with my pliers and I'm going to push it straight into that notch that I took it out of, and you'll feel it kind of bottom out. That's all you got to do is push it until it bottoms out, and you'll kind of feel it lock in place. The next step is we're going to get that spring. We're going to put it right back in the groove. We'll push it over, and now you can see that it's dropped right back into that groove. Alright, and you want to test this right now by pressing in on your magazine release button and making sure that it's working just right. Okay, now we can put our trigger group back in. You're going to put the front portion in, so drop your trigger shoe through and drop your housing into a spot in the back, and if you press forward just a little bit, it'll lock into place. And put in your locking block, and that just slides right in, really easy, goes right in there. Next thing you're going to do, if you have a 3-pin setup like this, is you're going to put in your smaller of the 2 pins, the top pin, and that's, for me, that's this one. Remember, we're going right to left, and see how easy these go in? You want to get it centered. There you go. They go in really easy, just like they came out. Next thing you're going to do is take your slide stop and put this in there. Now, there's a spot that this slide stop spring will slide right into. Now we're going to put in the larger of the 2 pins. Remember, going right to left. And if you have to, just wiggle your slide stop just a little bit, and there you go. You could hear it click right in there. Double check. Yep, it's in there. Now to check to make sure that your slide stop is aligned properly, pull up on it, and it should have some real positive spring tension in your trigger housing pin. And push that guy back in. And just make sure it's even. And so now we're back to our Fieldstrip Glock, and I'm going to show you exactly where you want to loop this gun. I'm going to use this Ran COP. It goes on really easy with this applicator. Now these rails, you're going to put 1 drop on each of the rail. 1 drop, 1 drop, 1 drop. What you can do now is put 1 drop on your cruciform right here. You never want to put oil in this channel back here, in this hole, or anywhere around your extractor or this safety plunger. Okay, the only oil you need is a drop right here in your rails, and then put a little drop right here. All right, just really easy. Take your finger, kind of smear it over. That's all you need on your slide. Put a little bit on the outside of your barrel, on the hood. Take your finger and just kind of wipe it all around. On the bottom, these locking lugs. Don't get it inside the barrel or on this feed ramp. Okay, you want to keep that dry. Before we put this thing back together, I want to show you how to check your drop safety. This is really important. What we're going to do is we're going to push our trigger bar all the way forward. Okay, so you can see when I push it all the way forward, I'm going to pin it there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my punch and push down on my cruciform, and it should not drop out. It'll move down slightly, but it should not drop out of our safety ledge, okay? That's what keeps this gun from firing if it's dropped. This passed. If it drops down, yours failed. Just make sure the tab on your trigger safety is resting against the back side of your frame. Once it is, you're again going to press down on your cruciform. It should not drop out of that shelf. If it does, your gun is not drop safe and you should not carry it. So now let's put this completely back together. Put our barrel in, lock it into place. Our guide rod and recoil spring locks in. When you put this slide back on, make sure to pay particular attention to lining up these grooves with your rails, okay? Want to make sure they're lined up and slowly press it on there. Make sure that you don't cross thread it. And then once you get to the rear, make sure those are in line. You're going to push it on, pull it all the way back, and release it. Now I want to check this trigger safety and make sure that it's working, so I'm going to pull the trigger without pulling this tab, and it keeps the gun from firing. That's perfect. Anytime you take apart your gun, you want to do a functions check. This is how we're going to perform this. I'm going to point it in a safe direction, squeeze the trigger. The firing pin should release. I'm going to rack the slide, release the trigger, should reset and allow me to pull it again. I really hope this video and article helped you gain a little bit more confidence and understanding about your Glock. And if you have any questions, please leave comments and I will make sure that I respond to all of them. Thanks and God bless.